evening, witches, warlocks, sorcerers, adepts, friends, fans, family, and followers, to Season 5, Episode 12 of the hit underground radio occult show known as Knights of the Nephilim, brought to you by Celestial Oddities Radio and the Coterie of Samil Arcane Occult Order. I am your host, as always, Frater Crow, and I will be your guide on this journey into magic and mysticism, darkness and divination, and it is certainly my pleasure to lead you. Feel free to click the like, share, follow, and subscribe buttons on whatever platform you're tuning in from, whether it be iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Deezer, Spreaker, Castbox, Google, Amazon, YouTube, Facebook, you name it, we're on it. You listen wherever you like. For those that like the live visual experience, we are across the Frater Crow, Knights of the Nephilim, Celestial Oddities Radio, and the Coterie of Samil Facebook pages. You can comment, you can be a part of the show. It'll be housed on there for 30 days before Facebook removes it. The Knights of the Nephilim Frater Crow YouTube page will also have live access right now. You can, leave comments. That'll be housed on there permanently. For those that might like the audio experience, after our shows are finished airing each week, we do then upload them to all those other platforms so you can listen on the go, in the gym, at work, wherever you would like. So got something for everyone, so make sure you click those buttons and move us up the podcast community rankings. Whether you're a fan of this show or maybe one of our other shows, Caniculum Obscuritatis, Last Caw, Uncovering the Underground, Paranormal Guys podcast, we have something for absolutely everyone. If you missed our past episodes this season, you have 11 other episodes so far in Season 5 of the Knights of the Nephilim. Some fantastic guests on the show, some great conversation and discussion, so definitely go back and check that out. All right, so tonight we journey into the frost-veiled north, into the world of runes that speak, shadows that move, and ancient spirits that still walk beside the living. Our guest is Kaedrich Olsen, author, mystic, paranormal investigator, and one of the foremost teachers of runic magic and Norse esoteric practice. His work bridges the gap between ancestral tradition and modern occult technique, unveiling the living intelligence behind the runes, the truth of shadow beings, and the subtle art of psychic protection. If you ever wondered how runes awaken, how hauntings take hold, or how ancient northern technology can shield the soul, then this is your night. Prepare your mind, open your senses, and get ready as we step into the circle. So grab your ceremonial attire, light your candles, and focus your desire as we summon Kaedrich Olsen. Good evening, brother.
Good evening. It's good to see you again. I'm glad to be here. This will be great.
It is very good to have you back. Yeah, as I've mentioned to you, when I asked you to come back on to Season 3, you are the most sought after guest I've had on the show, bar none, from everybody. So it's certainly great to have you back.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you, everybody. I'm glad to be here with you all.
So let's go ahead and jump right into it, guys. Tonight we're going to stick to a 1-hour time limit. We have things going on, so we only have 1 hour this evening. So we are going to take advantage of that full hour, and once again, we're obviously honored to have you. So, Kaedrich, what is the most misunderstood aspect of runic magic among modern practitioners?
Ooh, that's a good question. The most misunderstood aspect, this is something that's come across over the years, and I will blame the interpretations people get from the Roman historian Tacitus. Tacitus, in his book Germania, wrote about when he encountered a Germanic tribe where the man of that tribe, the village, would take a branch off of a fruit-bearing tree, cut it into little strips, put little characters, carve little inscriptions on them, and then put blood onto those inscriptions, and then would cast them on a cloth to do divination. To this day, people will say, well, you can only carve runes into the branch of a fruit-bearing tree, and when you carve the runes, you have to put blood into them. That's the only way that it works. And I will counter that with saying no, because if we go back even to the Havamal, one of the poems out of the Poetic Edda, where Odin hung on the world tree, and he hung there for 9 nights, stared into the abyss of Gunungagap, and found the runes. And when he fell back from the tree after gathering up the runes, he said something along the lines that they were shaped by the high holy rulers, and they were colored by the great singer. That tells us that runes don't have physical form. that runes are actually vibratory in nature, that they were colored, that they were brought into existence through sound, through frequency. And it doesn't matter what material you carve the runes into. It doesn't matter what you use to color them or to stain them with. What matters is your intention, that you're tuning into that. So like if you're working with a Fehu rune, about value, about effort, time, and energy that you're putting into something, the investment, that if you just have a Sharpie and a piece of paper, you are the one singing the rune. You are the one connecting with that runic energy that has existed in a time before time, that stretches back throughout all existence, and it still works. Or if you want to go through the elaborate process of cutting off a branch off a tree and whittling it down and carving it and then putting your own blood into it to sing the rune, it's just as effective, because it's not about the physical shape of the rune or the material it's made out of. It's about your connection to that ancient frequency, that ancient energy that has existed even before time itself.
No, I love that. That's absolutely beautiful. It's like we are the receptors. I mean, we're a guitar string, and we can receive that frequency no matter what medium we use. And that's beautiful. Is we sometimes like to think too narrowly that it has to be this way, but no, it can be done in a multitude of different ways because it's alive around us. It's not through any one substance. It's in the ether itself.
Absolutely 100% correct. And that validation, just like you said, it's all around us. It's in everything. It's found in another poem from the Poetic Edda, the Sigurd Þrifumál, about a Valkyrie who's woken up from her induced sleep, and she teaches the hero Sigurd the ways of the runes. And she basically lists that they're on everything, everywhere, all the time, that there are speech runes, that there are healing runes, that there are baneful runes. The runes are everywhere, in everything, constantly, not just the little things that you carve on a piece of stone or wood.
And then actually, through just our discussion there, what happens, a lot on the show is we answered, one of the next questions I had, which was, in your view, are the runes alive, or are they archetypes we activate, and where do we draw that distinction? But I think we kind of answered that, is that we do take what is already alive and we bring it to form through our different mediums that we use.
Correct. Correct. Just like we are physical beings with a spirit, we're both physical and spiritual. You can take that Sharpie on a piece of paper, or you can take that piece of wood with carving it. That becomes its physical form. But through your breath, through your energy, through your intention, you give life to that piece of wood or that piece of paper. You're accessing this ancient energy. So are they archetypes, or are they living? Both. They're living archetypes. They're archetypes to our mind, but they're living energies that permeate literally everything.
Well, and that brings me to a good question. How does the subconscious then interpret runes maybe differently than our conscious mind?
Ooh, that's a good question. And the best way to answer that is go by the feeling. This is something that we men have been taught to suck at. Feeling.
Yeah.
But the primary language of all spiritual entities, no matter if it's runic energies, if it's a low-level bottom feeder like a thought form or a higher-level guide, the primary communication form is emotion. So when we look at a rune, when we're aware of what maybe that rune means, what does it feel like to you? And so maybe we can have an interpretation. We look at Fehu and we're like, well, no, that's the rune of cattle. Therefore, it's a rune of money, and that this can only deal with money. But when you're tapping into that and you're really getting to the feeling of that, and you're like, well, wait a minute, this is talking about the value of this object, the value of what I'm bringing to the world. So wait a minute, what's this value? And so you start to interpret the feeling, which is coming from your subconscious mind. And so your subconscious mind will fill out more of what that Fehu rune means, despite what you've read about it or what you think about it. Your subconscious mind will give you that deeper interpretation, that deeper connection to really what's going on with that rune.
I love that because, as you said, we're often taught to suppress that feeling, that emotion. And you know what? We really do ourselves a disservice when we suppress that, because emotion has such a powerful resonance in someone's practice, in someone's reading and divination. And if you're cutting out that, you're cutting out a lot of insight that comes to you, because emotion is going to trigger so many different thoughts that you might not have otherwise if you're just doing it at that conscious level.
Exactly. I was talking with a client the other day, very intellectual, very smart woman, and she's used to having a logical reasoning answer for everything. And she's getting more into this. She's becoming more aware of her perceptions. She's getting more aware of subtle energies. And as I'm teaching her to connect with those emotions and to be aware of those emotions, I helped her to realize that yes, the intellectual part is great. Even like business owners, they know how their business runs, they know the logistics, they know all the systems and how it all works. But tapping into that intuition expands your intelligence in a way that the conscious mind can't understand, but it will expand your intelligence beyond the limits of what you've got now, because you're now processing as a whole being rather than just intellectually. You're intellectual, you're emotion, you're intuitive, and you're bringing them all together for a clearer, more full picture of what's going on. And it will help you make better decisions quicker with a whole lot more clarity of what you're doing and why.
100%. 100%. Now, what changes when runes are chanted versus carved? I hear different people talking about chanting the runes, and the aspects and experiences they have from that, rather than just using it as something to read from.
When they're carved, they're more like, let's say, a container of energy. They're holding that energy, that holding that intention for you. But runes are frequential beings. It's better to think of them as frequencies. Maybe for consciousness frequencies, I'm not sure. But they're feelings, they're energies. And so when you're singing the runes, when you're chanting the runes, you're bringing that energy to life. And when I tell people to Galdr runes, which the Old Norse word for singing runes is Galdr, you want to think about what that rune means, what it means, especially for this situation you're working on, but you got to feel it. What does that feeling of that rune give to you? And then experience that moment of actualization. What is going to happen in that moment? And so when you're bringing those three parts of yourself together and you're singing the runes, you are now loading that amulet, that physical object, with that energy, or you're pushing it out into the causal field to create it to happening. So you're basically creating living energies set with that intention to bring about the changes and the results that you want. So singing is a very, very important part of rune work that I think got lost in the modern times. Most people don't realize that singing runes is the old traditional way of working with runes, not the divination tarot card kind of thing that
Yep.
a lot of people are doing today. So singing runes, I can't de-emphasize the importance of that.
And once again, and I love when we start vibing, because the very next question is, how does Galdr alter the energetic field around the practitioner? And you just answered that, and that's why I wanted to bring that up, because I figured you would lead right into that is the traditional way. And unfortunately, over time, people start to lose tradition, and they start to add, like you said, it's become more of a tarot. It's become more of a way to only work with it that way, and it's like, well, you're kind of missing a huge, point or a huge purpose behind this energy.
Exactly. We'll go back to our Fehu example. Fehu is value. Now, when we look at, let's say, I bought this mouse and its value is what I originally paid for it, but now it's got a stronger intrinsic value to me because it's an important tool for working on the computer. I don't know, I could use a trackpad or something, but the mouse is so valuable to me. But turn it inward. What is your value? What is your value that you bring to the world? And if your sense of value for yourself is low, you're already programming your causal field, the Norse called it the hamingya, to bring you low value situations, to bring you low value people. And so you're going to see this constant reflection of your energy field of lower value. But if you take that time to work with Fehu, to feel that higher level value, to check in with yourself, what are your strengths? What are your gifts? What are your talents? What are the accomplishments you brought? And you feel that sense of a higher value for yourself. And you start singing Fehu over and over. You're changing your energy fields, your haminya, to be more of a higher value. And you'll start to notice that you're having higher value conversations with people. You're meeting with people that are higher value. Things are being reflected back to you that represent that higher value just by singing Fehu, just by connecting with that Fehu energy in a way to amp up your own perception of your own value. It changes your energy field in a big way by doing that.
Yep. And it goes back to the saying like attracts like. It really does. I mean, it sounds so simple, but it does. But it is also so hard, folks. I mean, it is simple in concept to say, find value within yourself, love yourself, and the rest will follow. But it is as simple as that. But the hard part is to find the love for yourself. So many people struggle with that love. They hold the trauma and the baggage and all that shadow work that's been not faced, and you just find a disdain for yourself. And unfortunately, if you can find that love and you can battle through all that, it opens up so many doors.
Absolutely. And shadow work is key. This is where, like me as a shadow worker, I love doing shadow work with folks because if they're struggling to find that value, they can sit there and they can go at the logical level. Yeah, I did this. I can do that. I make these changes for people. I can see how I'm important. But their feeling is just like, oh, no, I'm not. I just suck. I'm not great. Great. Let's get into the shadow. Let's get into that feeling. What does that feeling have to say about you? And weirdly enough, you can use runes for that because runes are abstract enough that if you tune into that, what part of me is not feeling valuable, and maybe you do grab a rune out of your bag or a few runes out of your bag, and you look at those runes, you think about what they mean, but what's the feeling? What's the message there? That shadow will start talking to you. That shadow will start saying, oh, Thurzaz shows up. Yeah, I had a pretty tough childhood. Oh, that's why, because I got told a lot that I suck, that I'm no good, I'm not going to amount to anything. That's where it comes from. And it will just come from holding that Thurzaz rune, looking at it, recognizing it's a rune of aggression and hostility. And you go, yeah, I did have a lot of upbringing. That's where it comes from. And so that will help you start to tap into that shadow and how that shadow is protecting you by not showing up as more valuable, so that if you're playing smaller, you're less likely to be a target. So you're not going to be bigger. You're not going to be more prominent. And you're like, well, that doesn't apply anymore today. So what do I do to get through this? Well, then you maybe pull out the Tiwaz rune. You're like, oh, focus, discipline, structure. I just need to get more into weightlifting. Oh, okay, great. There's weightlifting. That's that shadow talking to you. See if you can prove to yourself that you can be in the gym and you have this structure and this discipline. There's your value right there. You're like, yeah. So even that rune will help tell you what the shadows are inside.
And discipline is an essential key to find love for yourself. But the problem is, once again, when you have people out there that hate themselves or think so negatively about themselves, to then not only feel negative about yourself, but then to try to find that discipline to do something, it's like you don't want to move. You're like in this lethargic state. But if you can start hitting the gym, as you said, if you can start doing a practice of meditation or ritual or anything daily where you commit yourself to it day in and day out, with that structure, folks, you'll start to notice that a lot of that baggage you carry just starts to fall away, because in that structure, in that discipline, is yourself. You've only been kind of hiding behind all this extra baggage you put there. So discipline is 100% essential to really unfolding.
And here's an interesting little bit of information that tends to get hidden in that shadow is pay attention to your inner dialogue. When we're saying things like, oh, I'm going to be happy when I can lift this amount of weight, or I'll be happy when I lose this weight. Things are going to be so much better if I get another job and make more money. Things are going to go so much smoother when this happens. You're really telling your subconscious mind, I suck right now. I don't like the way things are. I'm not happy right now. So your subconscious mind and your body are going to go, then why do I bother? Who cares? Because it sucks right now. So who cares? But if you can take that moment to go, look at what I do have, look what's working out, look what is good, and you catch yourself on that inner dialogue, I'll be happy then. Well, what can I be happy with now? And you look around at those things that are happy and making you happy, that are making you feel fulfilled now. It's that like attracts like, similarities attract and perpetuate. You're having that gratitude for what's working for you now. You're having that joy for what you do have now. And then you start drawing that in more and you're like, oh, and then it just starts building on itself like a feedback loop.
It does, and it's beautiful to see. And I know, obviously, you teach a lot of different students and a lot of different people that come to you those factors, and I do as well. And it's beautiful to watch that unfolding start to take place. And like you said, that exercise of mindfulness is huge. To say, go about your day not as you, but as you, and witness yourself from outside yourself. Why do you act the way you do? Why do you think the way you do? Why do you do the steps that you do throughout the day? And a lot of that, folks, will start to surprise you. I've given the example before where something so minute in your life can happen and you get this rage and you're like furious. And when you're in it, you're not thinking clearly and you're just in rage. But if you can learn to step outside yourself and watch yourself raging, and you kind of stand back and you're like, how silly. Like, why am I flipping out right now? It's something so trivial, something so small. And then you're like, wow, that's such a program. I'm falling back into these old patterns that I'm snapping out over something that never actually angered me. I just taught myself that anytime something doesn't go my way, that I'm going to snap out and have anger. And you can start to break those cycles. And that is huge whenever you start to actually see it as someone else.
Absolutely. Having that third person perspective of yourself, so important. An interesting question to ask yourself is, would I treat somebody else like this if they did that? Would I treat a child who did that? Would I treat them like the way I'm treating myself? And if the answer is no, well, then start treating yourself in the third person. Pretend you're like that child that made a mistake. What kind of forgiveness can you give yourself? And sometimes that's not easy because that inner dialogue comes in and says, no, 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 no. But that's where we have to go back and do some deeper shadow work. But we can get through that.
And through that deeper shadow work, you nailed it there. It's also you find the inner child. So just as you said, if you would talk to a child, it's okay, buddy, no big deal. But you're so hard on yourself. Well, through time, in mindfulness, and through these exercises that Kaedrich is talking about, folks, you then end up finding your inner child, and you're like, it's okay, man. It's okay that you made mistakes. It's okay that you've had failures. And it's a beautiful thing when you get in touch with your inner child, because so many of us have lost that. If you can keep some type of bridge of connection between you and the younger you, then you will thrive in life. But we just shut that off, and we forget that we were children once. We forget that we were starry-eyed. The world's endless in front of us, and if we can find that again, it becomes endless.
And full disclosure, that is something I'm still working on to this day. Not being so hard on myself if I make a mistake or forget something at the store. My initial response be like, what'd I do? And it's like, wait, no. And my wife is a huge help for that. She reminds me, you don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. I'm like, thank you. So even that outside perspective from somebody else that can call you on it is so helpful.
And it's not always defeating patterns. It's just breaking them.
Yeah.
And they're going to form again because they're going to recrystallize, and you're going to smash them again, guys. And they're going to reform and you break. It's not often you're just going to sweep them away and they're gone. They're going to reappear, but by being cognizant of it, noticing it, we just keep breaking it. So as it tries to form a mold around us, we say, no, we can't be captured. And we break that. Now, we have a fan question coming in right now. Let's see here. Sarah says, Mr. Olsen, if a depressed person in general, what would you recommend them do as a first step onto the right track? Perception seems so difficult to change.
It is difficult to change, but try a reframing technique. This is where we can move from like Nauthiz to Wunyo, to bring it back to runes, for example. Nauthiz is a rune of need, of constraint, of the things that you don't have. So when we're in a Nauthiz state, we're in like scarcity. Wunyo is a rune of joy, of gratitude, of having. Now, the situation that we're in doesn't change. For example, I use this example all the time, is somebody has paid their bills, they made it to the end of the month, they've got $20 left in the bank. A Nauthiz perspective is like, oh crap, what am I going to do? I never have any money. This sucks. Well, of course, the universe is going to reflect that back to you, and you're going to get scarcity gains. But then you could shift to the Wunyo perspective of, okay, the bills are paid, things are taken care of, and I've got $20 left. Look at that. I still have some money left over after everything. How cool is that? And now you start getting reflected back the abundance gains. So it starts with having that kind of grounded perspective of life around you. What things are working, what things aren't working, where things are, and then shifting the frame from, okay, this sucks that things are like that, to like, well, here are the good things about that. Even if it's something as simple like a yellow light. I hate yellow lights, but getting hit with a yellow light is like, or it's like, okay, is this a moment I could take a breath? Is this a moment that I can just listen to the music? Or am I missing a potential traffic accident by getting this yellow light? It's the same situation, but it's like, how do I see it differently? And it might even help. Somebody just kind of whispered this to me. One of the whisperers said is to look at somebody who you think has it all together, somebody that you think isn't depressed, or that somebody who's very happy. And if they were in this same situation, what would they think about it? What would they say about it? Because we're right in the middle of it. We might go, this just sucks, I can't stand it anymore. And even more fun, guides, working with guides and teachers. They hit me with another one, is look at it from that other person's perspective and what would they say about it, and then try to shift your thinking to that. And the reason why the guide subject came up is because when I'm working one-on-one with clients, I call in whisperers for me, and I call in their guides to help guide the session, to help make things work for their best good. And sometimes a person is going through a very difficult time in life. It's depressing, it's challenging, it sucks. They're like, what do I do with this? And the guides that come in, the higher level beings, they've got a flippant attitude about it. Like, yeah, isn't it really cool what you're going through right now? And they're like, no, this sucks. What do I do to get out of it? Oh, spoilers. We can't tell you that. But meanwhile, they're looking at it like, wow, look at the skills you're developing. Look at the resilience that you're building. Look at what you're learning from this. For a majority of my clients, the people who have ended up in relationships that work really wonderfully for them and work really great for them were right after they got out of a bad relationship. I even had a client once that did some intuitive connection. Should I get into this relationship? And they got nothing but yeses. So they got into the relationship. It was bad. It was horrible. And they're like, why would I get yeses for this? And I'm like, well, what did you learn from that? And they put all the pieces together. They learned this, they learned that. And they went into another relationship. Now they could see all the red flags. And because they could see where the red flags were, they also knew where the green flags were. And they had a great relationship. But they wouldn't learn that level of discernment if they didn't go through the ordeal of the bad relationship.
100%.
So maybe try to take a look at it from a guide's point of view. Like, what are you learning from this? What are you gaining from this ordeal? How can you start using it right now? And so those little perspective shifts of how would somebody else see it? How can I see another? How can I reframe what I'm looking at? Or what would the guide say I'm getting out of this? That will help to shift some of the mentality out of that.
And I think that that's huge because I've talked about it quite a bit on the show of what Carlos Castaneda in his books would talk about as place of pivot, and it's all about your place of pivot. If you stand in one place, you're only going to see the scenery of that place, and if you staying that your whole life, then there's a chance you haven't seen much beyond what's in your focal point right then and there. But if you take 6 steps to the right and look around, you say, "Oh wow, there's a whole different scenery here that I never even knew existed." Well, yes, because you stayed so locked into place that you never were able to see it. And I think that, switch of perception or perspective is huge. And as you said, it's all about being in that because you could look at, as you said, $20 left at the end of the month. This sucks. Or I got $20. You know what I mean? And that's huge because it sounds so simple, guys, but it really does change the way you go about the following days after that. And I've talked to a lot of students working diabolism that, just like you said, Kaedrich, they get confused because they're like, well, I called upon a spirit to better my life. And I'm like, okay. They're like, then everything went to absolute shit after that. They're like, I lost my job. My girl left me. They're like, I had altercations with my best friends and this and that. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, well, yeah, see, so obviously it was horrible. I'm like, why is that? Because everything's falling apart. I'm like, you're wanting your life to change without changing your life. It doesn't work like that. If you want change, change will come, but change isn't comfortable. In fact, change is often messy, change is often painful, but change brings change. So we have to, Sarah, look at it like that, that, when we're going through a dark time, it can suck, it can be bad, and it isn't always going to lead to great things, but it certainly can. And perspective and appreciation for the doors closing so that new doors can open is big. So, hopefully, you've taken something from that. I know she did leave a comment, said, powerful, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, that was great advice from Kaedrich. Let's go ahead and jump. And I wanted to talk about, in your experience, I know you do a lot with paranormal, as do I, and that's something that I've always very much appreciated about you, because there's a lot of occultists out there, there's a lot of mystics out there, but there's not a lot like us that are actually out in the field doing paranormal research and dealing with these beings outside of our temples. And what is your experience on what the true nature of shadow beings are?
Depends on the flavor. I grew up in a neighborhood that was filled with shadow people. Even people who didn't believe in spirits or ghosts or whatever, when they would come through the neighborhood, they'd be like, as I was driving down the street, I saw somebody standing on the corner, and I go to look over, and there's nobody there. But it was like a shadow of a person. And so the neighborhood I grew up in was filled with these beings all over the place. They were never threatening, they were never harmful. They were more, I would say, astonished as I was at seeing them as them seeing me, but I couldn't communicate with them. I've communicated with all sorts of entities, all sorts of beings from different kind of physics, different kind of realities than we have. But for some reason, it's just like we didn't have enough overlap to communicate. So I don't fully understand what they are. I don't think they're malevolent. I don't think they're harmful, but they're just as curious as we are. Maybe there are other people in another alternate reality. I don't know. Maybe they're just natural beings that exist out of phase with us slightly. I don't know. But then there's the other kind of shadow beings that come from shadow energy. And what I mean by that is 100% we live in a paranormal reality, no matter what. We are spiritual and physical beings. As much as we are physical beings, we have a spiritual energy around us. So too does the room that you're in. The room has a physical structure, but there's also energy in that room. The whole planet has energy all around it. The spiritual side of things cannot be separated from the reality around us. And we human beings are powerfully creative beings. We create thought forms, we create entities all the time with our emotions, with our beliefs. Zeitgeist creates massive entities. They've been called archons or reptilian beings. They've been called many different names over the years. But every emotion we feel generates energy. So if we are in a constant state of fear that there's a spirit in our house, we'll be putting out this energy that will create a thought form that subsists off of fear energy. And it pokes us with fear energy so that we generate fear energy to feed it. And so it kind of creates like this parasitic relationship with us. But when we get into our own shadows, and shadows are primarily emotions, they're living in our subconscious mind. They're the things that we don't want to see, the things that we don't want to acknowledge, maybe we're ashamed of, but they need to get out somehow. They still need to present themselves. And just like we can create a thought form, we can create a shadow being that will feed off of our shadow state. And so maybe we have a hard time speaking up publicly, but now we have to give a presentation at work and we psych ourselves up, we're ready to go. But now there's a shadow being out there that's feeding off of that shadow energy of fear of public speaking. And just before you're ready to make that presentation, it pops up and goes, you're going to suck at this. You stumbled over your words every time you practiced it. These people are just going to laugh at you, so that you're now producing that shadow energy and it gets fed. And it just continues to feed that shadow inside you so that it gets fed. And so we are the creators of those kind of shadow beings. And when we do our own shadow work, we start to starve it. It starts to dissipate. But those are the two types of shadow beings that I'm familiar with. I hope that answers the question.
No, it certainly does, and I think it brings into question a lot. When people experience, the classic sense of shadow beings of sleep paralysis, and they wake up in the middle of the night and there's something in the room and they can't move. A lot of times people want to say, well, what do you think it is? Where is it from? And as you mentioned, it very well could be a being of another dimension of sorts that we don't understand. But I believe in a lot of those specific cases, they are our own shadow, aspects or fragments of our own shadow that we've created that are haunting us in our sleep. And the reason I say this, folks, is a lot of times that people have reported on my other show, Paranormal Guys podcast, about shadow beings. We've had a ton of calls from all over the world about it. We've interviewed people about it. What you'll find is most of the people that have experienced sleep paralysis and shadow beings in tandem with one another were either in a stage of their life where they were addicted to something. They were an alcoholic, they were a drug addict, or they were in heavy depression, they were in abusive situations. It always seems that there's something going on that's very dark in their life, and the way that that's then manifested is through, for some reason, sleep paralysis and shadow beings, and they are terrifying and they are oppressive, and we can look at them as something foreign to us because in a way they are, but they are also coming from us and the situation of the house we're in. If you're living in a house with abuse, with a house with neglect, a house with all of these horrible things going on, as Kaedrich explained, that can then take on its own egregoric form, and it'll become its own living being that'll feed off that, and it makes you, as he said, feel like crap because then it feeds itself. So you get scared over something that doesn't make sense. Why are you scared? Because it triggered that fear response so that it could eat. That doubt, all of that. It's like, oh, feed me, and it's really hard to battle that. The longer and bigger you let it get, the harder it is to battle. And that's an important thing that we battle it, because if you notice all these side thoughts, obviously sometimes we're thinking something and then an intrusive thought will come, and that happens. But if you start to notice it's constant and all the time there's intrusive thoughts coming in, you're like, shut up, get out of here. Then you got something beyond just yourself, guys. You have something that is truly there, and it's trying to cause agitation so that it can eat. So you have to address that, or else it will just grow bigger and bigger.
And this is where we get to flip the script on what most people think of as paranormal experiences, because they think of paranormal experience as something happening to me. I'm powerless. I'm helpless in this situation. I'm under attack. And I would counter that with one of my rules of interacting with the paranormal. Every paranormal experience is a co-creative process. Every single one, whether you're talking to a guide or you're being attacked by a negative entity. So that means you get to stop in that moment and go, how am I generating this? How am I creating this experience? What is it in me that is making this happen? And that gets you to take back your agency. Instead of saying this is happening to me, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm experiencing. How do I change that? And that comes from that reframing process. That comes from maybe some deeper shadow work. That comes from that introspection of what is it in me that needs this experience? And when you start to shift that, this thing can't mess with you anymore because you're changing the parameters of that co-creative experience.
I think that is an incredibly, incredibly powerful statement that, paranormal activity and hauntings are a co-creative experience, because what I have noticed before, I have a team, we go over the country. What I'll notice is you could have 20 teams in a building and they never get the responses that your team gets. And when you go there, you get it. Now, could it just be that it interacts with you differently? Yes. But there'll start to be some nuances where you'll notice I had a spirit, and I still don't quite know what it was, or what it is, that for years would come through, excuse me, on investigations again and again and again, named Steve. And he would just keep saying his name, Steve, Steve. It would do it on all kinds of different devices. It would do it. Some of our sensitives in the group would, pick up Steve, and all he would ever say was his name. But no one else would get Steve unless, ironically, it was another Steve. But we could go place after place after place, and Steve just keeps coming through, keeps coming through, keeps coming through. But other teams would go and they wouldn't get Steve. Why? Because Steve, for some reason, has something to do with me. What, I don't know. He's never dark or anything malicious, but it proves that we do bring an element to the table. It is very much like I always said, we are a spark, and the spiritual energies are the fuel. And when we come there and we start interacting, we give our spark to these metaphysical energies, and it brings to life different aspects of ourself, different aspects of that house and what's happened there, different aspects of our team. I coined the phrase years ago, metaphysical condensation, because as you were saying, in the buildings, there's so much saturated metaphysical energy that has been in that building and the bedrock of that place, that we bring it to life sometimes because it just happens to mix like a chemistry so well with our individual self that the next person beside us wouldn't have it. But whatever faculties we know, beliefs we believe or don't believe, all of that biases go into exactly the experience we have that's unique to each individual person.
Which is why I think the amazing Randy proved himself to be wrong. As you may remember, the amazing Randy
Yeah.
was a stage magician that spent years trying to debunk psychic abilities and paranormal activity, and he had $1 million in escrow for anybody who, under clinical settings, could prove verifiable psychic or paranormal
I
experiences.
remember that.
He was dead set that these don't exist, that it's not going to happen. And his results were 100% failure, which is not possible under any sort of laboratory testing conditions. 100% success, 100% failure rate to me means 100% success rate. He shut down the psychic abilities.
Absolutely.
He shut down the paranormal experiences with his determination that this is not true, it's not real. And so to me, he proved himself correct through having a 100% failure rate.
And that goes back to something, excuse me, I've had a tickle in my throat all night. It's gone back to something I've said before on my other show, that if you take 5 skeptics, firm skeptics, and you put them in one of the most haunted places in the country, a lot of times they walk out at the end of it, just like the Amazing Randy. They come out and they're like, nothing happened. I didn't experience anything. Bogus. And you take 5 people that are absolute believers and you throw them in there. They have mind-bending stuff all night. Now, it could be that some of that's just their mind playing tricks on them, sure. But whenever you put people who are firm believers in, they have experiences. When you have people that are firm skeptics, they don't. Why is that? Because if you're going to shut off the mechanism, then you're not going to, it's just like ritual. If you go into, conjuration and you're conjuring a spirit, and the entire time you're saying the incantations and invocations, nothing's going to happen. It's not going to come. Chances are it won't. But if you are very open, it's opening Pandora's box. You're allowing the faculty of your imagination to be used as a dressing room for the spirit, and you're open to the fact, come in and show me what it is you would like to show me. It's going to use your understandings and faculties to then bring to life the way that you can perceive and understand that spirit. And then it happens, and you're like, oh, goodness, like that's crazy. But if you go in saying, it's not going to happen, I don't believe in it, it's not possible, well, then it's not going to happen. And somebody could say, well, then that proves that it's not real. No, that proves that your biases will counteract what you're going to have, happen in front of you. So I think that everyone should be skeptic in the sense of don't believe every bump in the night is something. But someone should be open enough to allow those bumps in the night to show themselves if they are firmly there.
Yep, a few pieces I've got on that is I love one of the things that the chaos magicians use in the ritual chamber, the suspension of disbelief. So that you can let yourself use belief as a tool just for that moment. And when you do that, things will start to shift. And that leads into what I call the believing seeing dynamic. If you let yourself believe a little bit that there's spirits out there, that they're interacting with us, you'll see it a little bit. But by seeing it a little bit, that'll increase your belief. Oh, there is something there. And then you'll see it even more. And then that creates that feedback system to the point where you're like, yeah, it's everywhere. It's here all the time. But like you said, an important rule, test and validate everything. Because am I interpreting this wrong? Am I making this up? Is my imagination gone wild? Is it just pareidolia? Or is that pareidolia connected to something that I'm receiving? So you get to learn discernment along the way. You get to discern what is me interpreting versus what's me making it up versus what am I seeing and what am I receiving. So it's a nice little back and forth game of, I believe this, but did I really see that? Is that really valid information? And ultimately you come back to the chaos magicians. Doesn't matter how you did it, results matter. If you're getting the results, that's the only thing that matters.
And the feedback loop's very interesting in the fact that, as you said, something very small happened, then you're like, ooh, it happened. And then it feeds it more and then more, as you said. But what's interesting about that, too, is mistakes or inaccurate paranormal phenomena can then cause paranormal phenomena. So, for example, wind blows through a window, knocks a book off a shelf 2 rooms away from you in a paranormal investigation. It hits the ground, scares the hell out of everybody, and everybody jumps. If you don't move yet because you're still wanting to see what else is going to happen down the hallway, it just blew your mind open. You're like, oh, goodness, something's here. And you really start opening yourself up. And then all of a sudden you do see a full body apparition walk across the hallway. And then once again, it just feeds back and forth. And then later on you walk down the hallway and say, wait a second, I can feel the wind blowing. The wind caused the book to fall. But it doesn't even matter anymore because you believe so firmly that something just happened that you became more open to it, which then caused something to happen, which is very fascinating. As you said earlier, it's a one-to-one. It's very much out of us. It's very much in us, connected always. It's a bridge.
As you're saying that, I'm just thinking of an experiment I want to do. As you know, I teach seance. I help people learn how to communicate with spirits, and sometimes there's a bit of a block. But what about if we introduce infrasound to a seance? Infrasound is like sound in the range that we can't hear, below the range we can't hear. Like we can hear 20 hertz. And so infrasound, right around the 8 to 13 hertz, you can't hear it, but you can feel it. And people that have been put in an environment where there's infrasound, maybe it's a air conditioner fan that's a little out of balance, they get the feeling that there's something in the room with them. They get the kind of creep out paranormal feeling, even though there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And so when they fix the fan, it's gone. Or when they move to another location, it's gone. It's just because that infrasound is inducing those feelings in them. So now I wonder if we purposefully set up a seance where we have an infrasound generator going, and haunted attractions will use infrasound in their haunted houses all the time to help induce that fear state. So I wonder if we do that infrasound for a seance that will help to artificially induce a paranormal experience that will lead on to the real paranormal experience. Is it something to play with? I'm curious.
No, that's absolutely something to play with. I've done some similar where I've used brain hemispheric synchronization entrainment where, obviously you put, I'm just going to make up numbers, but you put 100 hertz in this ear, you put 20 hertz in this ear. Instead of hearing 20 or 100 or 120, you hear the 80. It makes both hemispheres of the brain tune to the difference between the two signals, which is very interesting. And then you can tune your brain specifically to one frequency. I have done tests during ceremonial magic where I have, before stepping into the circle, put my brain at different hertz frequency to see how it would affect my interaction with spirit. I haven't done in a seance session, which that's a very interesting concept, and I think it would definitely be worth testing out. But I have done it in ritual to see the difference in activity that I would get from the spirits that I was summoning, and I had some interesting results. My plan was to go much deeper into it, and then I got ADD and I got sidetracked on some other quests. But I did for a few months put some time into that. It was very interesting. Some of the different experiences where, and I'd have to go back to my books. There was a specific frequency I was tuning to that I wasn't really experiencing the spirit that I was calling. Any of the times that I was calling, which was really interesting, I was experiencing others. So instead, normally some of the other ones helped me tune into the spirit being called. No, there was a specific frequency that every time I did it, that spirit wasn't coming. It was just everything else was. And I'm like, well, where's he at? Why is he not coming? It was peculiar, and I never got to follow up as to why in that wavelength are we not getting what we're calling, but everything else is seeming to show up and say, well, we're here. I don't know. But I need to go back to that at some point in time. And I think the setting of the seance would be a beautiful way of testing that to see if it maximizes potency.
And I'll give you something more to try. The frequency of 111 hertz.
Okay.
If you're looking at a keyboard like a piano, and you go to middle C and you go down 2 A's, that's 111 hertz.
Okay.
Newgrange in Ireland resonates at 111 hertz. The hypogeum in Malta resonates at 111 hertz. So do several other megalithic sites have a resonance of 111 hertz. And so I've had great success with clients and students when I have them Galdr or I have them chanting. If they just hold down that A, or they have their computer or phone producing 111 hertz and they sing or they chant with that 111 hertz, they've had a lot of success with boosting the efficacy of their working just by adding 111 hertz to it.
Thank you. I like that. I'll definitely be testing that. That's interesting. And obviously, if we're finding different power sites around the world at that, there's a reason for that, because that was something that's lost in history that, unfortunately, some people still know about, and there's people that have hidden it. That's why we don't know about it. But, there is reasons why there's so many megalithic sites out there that were made in ways that we can't understand. And they're operating at, vibrational frequencies that we can't understand. How did they build the pyramids? They already said that they believe it was a large part of sound frequency moved the stones. but we just don't have the technology to do that anymore, or at least publicly don't have that technology.
And some homework for you. There have been actual clinical studies of people being exposed to 111 hertz. And there's some very interesting results on how it affected their mind and consciousness in clinical laboratory studies that have been peer reviewed.
It sounds amazing. I mean, honestly, like I said, those experiments that I did with the spirits, and then sometimes just in meditation, the different experiences I would have in meditation by bringing my hemispheres to the same place as one another. I had weird happenings that I can't quite explain, and I'm like, wow, man, sound is a trip if you can learn to use it in the right way. It is truly a tool.
Absolutely.
We got some comments coming in here. Just listen from Belgium. Here it just comes. I'm not sure exactly what which part you're speaking of, but hey, we appreciate your support. Rhonda says family with a heart. Thank you so much, Rhonda. Natasha, who's on my paranormal team, said he would change his tone conversationally. Yeah, she's talking about Steve. What was really interesting about Steve, and I'll jump off this real quick, is he wouldn't say anything other than his name through the spirit box or through any of our devices, but he would answer in different tones of Steve as if it was a question. So you're like, are you doing good today, Steve? Steve. And be like, oh, I haven't heard from you in a while, Steve. We were missing you. Steve. If you just say his name in different tones is like the way of answering our questions with his name. We had a really, really wild experience at a place called Wildwood Sanatorium in Salamanca, New York. Infamous place, very paranormal, that we kept getting Steve come through the spirit box. And we didn't realize it at first, but then we were hearing a second voice, and it said Steve probably 50 times, which was normal. It happened a lot. But every time it would go, Steve, it didn't sound like Steve. The voice was different. But every time it would say it, there was a whisper of a woman behind it going, that's not Steve. And then literally he would go, Steve. And then it would go, that's not Steve. We recorded this for like 10 minutes over and over again, him saying it, and that's not Steve. Steve, that's not. And I'm like, man, I don't know what's going on right now. It was pretty wild.
That's hilarious. Yeah, sometimes they have a sense of humor too.
They do.
Just because somebody dies doesn't mean that they're not a jerk anymore or a prankster. They can still do that.
Oh yeah, they have fun. They definitely have fun with folks. Especially like the more you do it, the more that they don't seem to mess with you, though it still can. But like newbies that go out into the field and they don't know what to think, I've seen so many times that the spirits have just had fun with them that it's kind of comical.
Absolutely.
Good old Steve. Natasha said absolutely. Laura says, excuse me, reminds me of that thing off Bill and Ted's station. Oh, God, I haven't seen Bill and Ted in years. I'm not sure which part you're talking about. Now, before we jump too much into comments, we only have a few minutes, so I want to get two more questions if I can.
Yeah.
Where do I want to go? I always have I tell my guests, I always come up with a list of 30 to 40 questions. I'm ready for like 5 episodes
Nice.
at any given time, so it's always hard to pick which ones I want to jump into. Okay, here's one I'll jump into. Do you believe that some people were just marked at birth to interact with spirits over others?
Sort of, but not really. I believe that every single person has these abilities. We are spiritual and physical beings. Just like we have physical senses, we have subtle senses. Every single one of us. And just like every single one of us, some of us are better visual, some of us are better audible, whatnot. We have our different skill levels with all that. Same way with the subtle senses. But it gets turned off because the people around us don't interact with the spiritual. We're ridiculed for it. It gets shut off. I do believe every single one of us are born into this world able to interact and perceive, to connect with the paranormal realms. It's just it gets cut off with our upbringing. And then there are some people that are more sensitive, more aware, they're more open or curious, and then they start to explore, how do I get this back? How do I reactivate that? And that's a good body of the clients that I have are people that have, reached a place in life that's a foundation. They're on solid ground and their abilities are coming back. They're asking the right questions. And I help them to recover their abilities and to bring them back online.
And that's a huge step. When you have that first at first like, oh wow, like I have abilities that I didn't think I had. I never thought because it's weird, you know, we tend to believe we don't have anything special about us, like we talked about earlier. That's that shadow integration that we need to get through. And then when you start to feel that, you're like, oh wow, I'm doing stuff that doesn't seem like I should have been able to do it. I thought only special people could do that. Well, my friend, you are special, and now that you know it, you need to build it. And as people start to build, it's such a beautiful thing to watch. As you know, folks go back 3 years, didn't have any ability that they knew of. 3 years later, they're just immaculate at what they're doing. They're tuned in, they're talking to spirits, they're powerful in ritual, they're able to do things that they never dreamed. It's amazing what the right teaching and the right environment and the right belief in yourself can really unfold.
I see it so many times. I've had so many clients say, I'm not a medium, I'm not psychic, I don't have these abilities, but I'm curious about what goes on. I show them a couple techniques, and in that session, within that session, they start getting the first message, and they're like, oh, is this what this is like? And I'm like, yeah, you are a medium. You have these abilities. This is what it's like. Now there's your homework. Go practice it.
Yep, it's truly amazing to see them uncover that diamond in the rough. You know, oh, it's in there. Yeah, it's in there. You just never do it because you never took time to look for it. You keep throwing another shovel full of dirt on that satellite dish and then wonder why the picture's hazy. But if you go back and scoop it all off, polish it all out, make sure it's pointed in the right direction, picture comes in crystal clear, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yep.
So since we are all pretty much out of time, I'm going to ask one more, and then we're going to do the outro and get you out of here. What is the single greatest teaching the runes have ever given you?
The single greatest teaching that the runes have ever given me. It's probably the nature of the runes themselves, not seeing them as the little carved characters on stone or wood, but that they are these frequencies, these energies that permeate everything, that they are the subtle connections between our consciousness and the greater universal consciousness, that you can access them just by tuning into what they are, and that they're available to anybody everywhere, no matter what, because they're just tools that are embedded into the fabric of reality.
I love that answer. That's right there as a short. I'm gonna have to make that into a short for this episode. I love that answer.
Excellent.
Well, guys, brothers and sisters, seekers, what a journey tonight. Kaedrich Olsen reminded us that the northern mysteries are not relics. They are roaring, brilliant forces waiting to be activated within us. The runes still breathe, the shadows still observe, and the dead still reach across the veil to speak to those with the courage to listen. I would like to thank Kaedrich for sharing his path and his wisdom, and thank you all for your stepping into the circle with us this evening. Until next time, stay grounded, stay vigilant, and walk boldly into the night. Ave Noctis. Thank you very much, Kaedrich, for coming on. As always, guys, Frater Crow, Knights of the Nephilim. We'll catch you next time.